Thank you. So I'm Jim Finnerty, co-founder of Myriad Data Security, where we're making the cloud a safe place for banks and credit unions to store their data. So when we speak to data managers at these organizations, they really stress about two key things. How do I make sure my data is secure? And how do I make sure it's available to the business when the business needs it? When considering a move to cloud storage, these concerns are heightened because it means unloading the control over these critical aspects of their job to an outside vendor. They don't trust the cloud. The cloud model also introduces another complication, something called provider lock-in, meaning when you move a large volume of data to a vendor, it can be very difficult if down the road you want to move it to another vendor, and switching costs can be prohibitive. So at Myriad, we've reimagined the cloud model to address these concerns, remove these barriers, while still providing the same benefits of scalability and geographic redundancy that the cloud model offers. We call it Zero Trust Cloud Technology, and here's how it works. Any document, the Myriad Cloud portal sits locally and attaches to an array of independent cloud vendors. Any document that gets stored through that portal is cut up into micro shards and distributed to that array so that no single vendor actually contains an entire document. This way, any security failure at one of these vendors is not going to result in the sharing of a complete document or any usable information. It's incomplete information. We also add a specially calculated value to each one of those fragments. Now, on its own, that value is totally useless, but it becomes very important and useful in the event of a service outage, where the remaining two fragments, the value, can be extracted, combined to recreate the missing data so that our clients never lose access to their business-critical information, even when one of their cloud vendors suffers a service outage. Now, this model also makes switching significantly easier and less costly because we're moving less volume to a new vendor. And lastly, we can implement this in a hybrid fashion to allow organizations to utilize the infrastructure that they already have on site while they move to the cloud in a stepwise manner. So we identify ourselves as a cloud security product, which is a market that is as wide as it is deep, and it's grown quickly. We've focused in on the financial institutions in the US because of their initial reluctance to move to the cloud, so a lot of them are primed and eager to move to the cloud. Yet they also have an immediate need for geographic dispersion and scalability, particularly in their archive and backup storage. Today, these organizations mostly rely on in-house management of infrastructure, which is perceived as lower risk, but when you factor in the total cost of ownership, significantly more costly than the alternatives that exist, such as the single cloud model, or what many organizations also use is outdated technology like tape. Myriad offers all the benefits of a cloud, of an individual cloud. We use the same operational cost model, which is volume-based pricing, and we enable the control that allows these data managers to maintain the control that they are used to with their on-premise management of infrastructure. To date, we've developed a proof of concept model, a product, that we've already deployed with our first paying customer. It's a bank in Virginia. We have a growing pipeline of clients with a credit union in Pennsylvania and a North Carolina bank planning to join us to launch in June. And we recently signed our first partner agreement, which is with a managed service provider, which we expect will become a major distribution channel for us. The product and the business are backed by a capable team that has over 40 years of experience working at companies like Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, Infosys, and Veritas. And they are dedicated to solving this problem for these data managers. At this point, we are opening up a round to give us the runway to mature our product from a proof of concept to the performance grade that an enterprise requires. If you have trust issues, when it comes to the cloud. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd also welcome any questions or feedback this time. Thank you.
A great job. So let me start with a couple of things that I think you did really well. So number one, you had a very good succinct intro of what Myriad does, right? You're making the cloud a safe place, right? So I thought that was really good. I can't tell you how many pitching folks that we get in here that do that and don't do that really succinct. So that helped me focus on where you were, where you were focused. So that was very well done.
Thank you.
I also like you did a little bit of what's the problem that I'm trying to solve, right? You did banks don't trust the cloud, and they really don't, by the way, including some of them right down the street here. And you also mentioned the vendor lock-in, right, as being the other problem that you were trying to solve. So I think that was very well done. And then when you were transitioning then over into here's what here's how we're doing this, right? You lost me a little bit because it wasn't as clear to me when you look at cloud compute and how it's being consumed, right? Is it a storage problem or is it actually a compute problem? So one of my bits of coaching to you was, and I think you got there a few slides further down, but the data storage and archiving was where you were starting, right? I'd try to maybe figure out a way to make that a little clearer up front. Around then, what's your value prop, right? What's the value that you're bringing to the table? If you really are a layer that's connecting these, you're not actually providing the ultimate storage, you're just a conduit.
That's right.
Right? A little bit about what the pricing model for that is, right? In terms of, investors are going to need to know how you make money, right?
For sure.
So a little bit on what that pricing model looks like. I liked your version of the Magic Quadrant, right, where you were doing your 4 quadrants and where you fit. It would have helped me a little bit, not only to do that you did that really from a technology point of view and physical versus cloud and where you fit in that low risk, high risk, low cost, high cost. It would have been interesting also to see there are other people that are competing in the space doing sort of that, how would I phrase it, where you're really doing that cloud management layer. And so I think that obviously investors are going to drill down and say, okay, who else is doing this type of thing, right? It's a bit of an orchestration layer that you're providing, right? There are other technologies that are doing that. So from a competitive point of view, where you fit, and I know it's almost impossible to jam all that into your time requirement, but let's see. On your request for funding. I know you're running out of time, but you didn't spend a lot of time on that, and I wasn't really sure if you were looking at a $250,000 angel round or if you were actually looking at a $2 million round, because you had both of those numbers on the slide.
Sure. Yep.
I can make that more clear.
Okay. Mark?
There you go.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll start. Just one, what I would call more mechanical point. I really like the animation that you did on that slide. Like a lot of people try to pull off animation and it doesn't always work. So just as it relates to your description of the product, the solution, the approach, right? You're kind of showing business, technical architecture and trying to explain something. I would just keep the animation and then I would try to cut your word use in half. You just were spending a lot of time. And that's just going to be a function of time and effort between you and your teammates. But almost like write the term paper and then start over and cut it in half, just to see how that helps you gel and simplify the idea. So that's my whatever you want to call it, nitpick. But strategically, I think the one thing I would focus you on as you guys work on your pitch and get out of the FinTech accelerator here is differentiation would be the word I would want to leave with you. You're kind of interestingly differentiated going through a FinTech accelerator. Out in the wild, you're going to be a storage company, a software company. Okay, so that's a good thing, I think, ultimately in terms of getting that seed round figured out and getting some capital. But I would focus on how is this story differentiated? Because if the purpose of let's go back to the 5-minute pitch, because I always kind of preach this here, is this is about getting 10 follow-up meetings, right? So you're going to spend valuable CEO time, going to a conference, sitting in San Francisco, right? Going to something. You're going to meet 50 mid-level, junior level, venture, capital, angel type people, right? and you want to convert those 50 how you doings into 10 real meetings. So differentiation is going to get you the right 10 meetings, and I think that's, that might just be too abstracted a point today, but it's less about your pitch today and more about where you take the pitch from here. I would work a little bit on that. I'm not saying you're not differentiating well, it just doesn't stick with me yet, right? So I'm not saying I wouldn't want to meet with you after this, but at the same time, like I kind of want to know more, and I think you could use why you're different. And selling to banks might be it, by the way. I don't know, but I would just work on that. Because you're close, but it's like I really was hoping that differentiation gear would click in a more meaningful way for me. But anyway, hard to do in 5 minutes. I get it.
Sure.
Anyway, good stuff.
Right. Yes, I definitely agree on all of these, and appreciate that you've taken something that could be complex and simplified it. And I agree, just by shortening a little bit that explanation, your visuals help a lot with that. I'd like to know about your competitors. And again, that goes back to your value proposition. How do you differentiate yourself? Let us know what do banks have. You did a good job of saying, okay, here's what they're using right now. What are the options that they have if they wanted to solve this problem that exists right now, and how are you different? To me, I think that what you're selling is trust, and I want to hear more about that. Why do I trust you? Because that's the thing that you're saying, okay, banks aren't already using a solution because they don't trust an outside vendor. So then you have to convince me that you're the one that I need to trust. And right now, I'm not quite there. So I want to know more about your team. Why is it your team? Is it your technology? Are you going to, if it's pricing, then that's another piece. But I feel like there's something there around the trust that you need to convince me that I want to go with you more than anyone else. And then your customers, I think that was great that you added that in. That's really useful as a investor. I know you already have one customer, you have 2 more that are coming on. Then there's definitely a market, and you have something that people already like, banks already like. So that was great.
Excellent.
Hey, one more point. Just I want to put the feedback into action because I actually wrote the note down. It's unfair for me to say cut your words down without giving you feedback on it.
Please.
For example, like you said, I think you said something like, banks or these things will move in a stepwise manner, right? Like just use the word transition. It's hard for these banks to transition, like we have, or whatever it is. Just like sharper use of like one word versus the idea. Because I can see the big ideas kind of floating through your head as you're trying to get them out. And just, it's going to be practice, but
Is it that obvious?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I have the same problem, so it's all good.
And I want to come back to this concept of the team and trust, right? Because again, the trust element of what you were getting at, I think is probably a more core message than I got from the presentation. And one way to do that, and I always recommend this, is we didn't get to the team until further down. I would push that up earlier, and then again, why does the team that's gathered together for this, what's their passion? I also want to know about passion, right? So what brought you to this, right? This is an interesting space.
More story.
Yeah, a little bit, but story around the team,
Yeah.
and how that leads to trust, to your point.
Right.
Yeah, that team slide's killer, right? Like I was like, oh wait, Microsoft, Google, wait, what's going on
But you
here?
only spent about 30 seconds on it.
Right. And I was actually wondering about that from the beginning. Okay, you're selling trust. Why do I trust you? I'm waiting for it. Here it is, but it's quick. So that's, you've got it. You have it. Just bringing it up.
Talk about it more.
Yes.
Excellent.
Anything else from the panel? All right, does anybody in the audience have any questions?
Sure.
Okay, Paul. So marketing-wise, you call it zero trust. Why?
Yes.
When you
I
want to
actually
gain
didn't
trust,
want
why
to
do
say
you
that.
call it zero trust?
Yes.
Sure. Q&A. All right, good. So
There.
we've actually borrowed that term from another cybersecurity movement called Zero Trust Networking, which segments a network so that an internal actor can't move around. We see that as you don't trust your own employees, and we've extended it to why would you place your trust in an external vendor? So Zero Trust Cloud Storage, I could borrow the same explanation and calling it Zero Trust because it assumes no trust in the outside vendor to do their job. That's why we
So
call it
your
Zero.
model is completely different likely from your customer model. That's my way to keep that. You have that background. When I hear zero trust, I have zero trust for profit.
Fair.
It
Yes.
puts that impression in my head immediately. So,
Good. Oh, I Appreciate that, thank you.
Got time for about one more.
Is there anything proprietary about your technology or protectable?
Yes, there is. If you'd like to know more about that, we can speak offline.
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe one more.
Yeah.
So for provider lock-in, I thought that was like a good selling point, but if you're splitting like 1/3 across Azure, 1/3 Google, 1/3 AWS, like where does the provider lock? Like how do you avoid provider lock-in? Because it's being split through those 3 companies by you. So it's not like they're working justice here, they could move to Google. So where is the provider lock-in? How do you avoid that?
Sure. So the real difficulty with switching providers is large volume of data that is going to be moved, and the time it takes or the effort it takes to move that large volume of data. We're moving if you want to switch out the Google component for Oracle, at some point we're moving a lower volume of data. Say again?
So it's switching it within your platform?
Within our platform, yeah.
Got it. So it's like if you want to split between a different 3 providers, we absolutely can.